Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Crescendo, where the journey of self-discovery meets the adventure of entrepreneurship for female founders, entrepreneurs, and small business owners. I'm your host, Rachel Lubchansky, an entrepreneur turned business mentor and strategist, guiding women to build businesses that align with who they are at their core, the positive change they want to see in the world, and the financial security they desire. Join us as we amplify the voices of women and unravel the complexities and joys of building a business that ignites a life of purpose on purpose. I hope that the crescendo stories you hear on this show will inspire you, empower you, and guide you into the most authentic, full, and beautiful expression of your own voice as a business owner. Today, I am delighted to introduce my guest, Ariella Zeitlin. She is an internationally renowned virtuoso violinist and singer who performs around the world at concerts and events. She also creates her own events, which you're going to hear about on the show, and I can't wait for her to share all the details with you. She was featured on The Voice Israel and received the Israel Ministry of Culture grant for her first album, Revelation. She's recorded for Warner Music, and her music has been featured in TV shows, documentaries, video games, and trailers. She uses captivating storytelling to inspire her audiences and uses her talents as a goodwill ambassador for Israel. Welcome, Ariella.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here with you.
I am so happy to have you on the show. We actually only connected just so we can share a little bit of our quick background with our listeners. We just connected in the last few weeks. I kept seeing your profile scroll on my Facebook feed. I don't even know how it got there. I don't know how we initially connected. But I was following you and super impressed by what you're doing. And then you caught my eye with your upcoming event. So we're going to get into all of that. But when we connected, it was just like what I call love at first sight. I am all about what you were doing and really looking forward to sharing in this conversation with you. So before we dive in, if you'll just give our listeners a little bit more background on who you are and how you got to be who you are today.
So before I even talk about me, I just want to say thank you to you, everybody who's listening. I'd like to announce that Rachel is an excited sponsor for my upcoming show, and where our visions are so aligned, and this is just going to be so like impactful for the people who are gonna like be there and see that you're a part of it. So I'm very excited about that.
My pleasure.
Ariella, I am a violinist and a singer. I have been playing the violin since I was a really little kid, and I moved to Israel when I was 17 all by myself, across the ocean, and since then, I'm very creative, and I do a lot of really fun things, and, that's how I got here today. So that was, like, all of it in a nutshell. So, let's go back and ask one question at a time. Okay.
So, one of the things that we talked about that was really interesting to me is that you trained as a classically trained violinist in your
Yeah.
youth. And we connected on this because I also trained as a classical singer and I enjoy classical music, but it wasn't what spoke to my soul like when I got into singing. And you spoke a little bit about that when we were on our call. I'd love for you to just share a little more about like when you got into college and the journey that you've been through in figuring out like where music really fits in.
Okay. So one of my great loves has always been storytelling, right? So and I'm going to connect it back, right? So and my training is classical. So I have a master's degree in classical violin performance. I also come from a family where my grandfather was a very well-known classical musician, and he really turned me on to the world of avant-garde modern classical music. So that was like my specialty, and I was very into it, very funny, like weird rhythms and weird harmonies. And that was like the stuff that I loved. And like for my whole like degree, that's like I focused like majorly in on that. But then I kind of realized when I finished my degree and I was kind of starting to perform and to work, I was like, people don't understand this story. People don't connect to this story. So how can I make it in a way that people do connect to it? Right. So that's always been like like, how do I put the pieces together? Like we need the stories and we need, we need art. So all of that together. So basically, I became very involved in the world of like cinematic music, and I do a lot of work where I do have a recording studio here, and I do a lot of work with composers who do music for soundtracks for different things. And I've always kind of loved how soundtracks is the like kind of that's the way that most normal people kind of find their way into like classical music. Like you'll watch a show and then you'll be like, oh, I love the violin in Bridgerton. So now I love the violin, right? So it's kind of like, um, what's it called? Like a stepping stone into like that world. So basically I've kind of realized that the music from movies is like very storytelling. And that's kind of my world is music from movies. So
How did you get into that though? I mean, because, I'm just thinking like, okay, here you are, you're a super talented violinist. You come from a family of violinists. You're classically trained, and then you make this connection to and this idea of violin needing to be more relatable, and like how can people connect to the classical side of music. And then you get into this connection of storytelling, and it's like so beautiful. But how then did you take that and just connect with the right people so that you could start to produce music with places and companies like Warner Music and different TV shows and documentaries and things like that, and all the things that you've done? Like, you don't just, like, pick up the phone and go, "Okay, hi, Mr. Warner. I'm, like, an incredible violinist. Let's bring this to the masses."
So I have to say that my real career has always been through social media. It's always been, I started uploading music to YouTube. My first music video came out, I think 7 or 8 years ago. And I've been producing music since then, all kinds of things. I mean, I had to like learn as I went. I used to record on like, oh my gosh, just the worst equipment, like an old mixer and like a handheld mic that I'd like, move onto the violin, and I would like prop my phone up on like a shelf, and until I got the equipment. It took me ages, and I was just like figuring it out as I went, and figuring out the whole world of recording. And then once I had some stuff that I had created, I started reaching out to people. I started telling people, well, I would love to work with you, I'd love to record for you. And it kind of really started, a lot more over the past like 3 years since Corona, because I was at home, and I was before that I was doing a lot of event performances. And then, Corona hit and I'm at home, and then that's when I really started doing a lot more recording and a lot more working like with soundtracks and like producing my own music and that kind of stuff.
So cool. Okay, I wanna go back to something that you just mentioned, which was the messy side of figuring all of it out, right? Where you're, like, piecing things together and
Yeah.
using what you now see as, like, really inferior equipment, and, right, so on this show, we talk a lot about the messy side of business building, right? Like, even the people that you see as super successful have been through or are continually going through the challenges of building a business. So I would love for you to speak to that, and how you've embraced the imperfections of doing it while continuing to move forward.
So, that's a really good question. I really like it because I think that the messiness is the most important part, and it's the most glossed over. And it doesn't even matter how much somebody talks about it, how many mistakes they made, and how it doesn't matter until you're actually in it, right? There's so much judgment that comes. You're like, people are always looking at other people and thinking, oh, I could do what they're doing, right? All the time. And then I'm like, I don't. When you're in the middle of the arena, that's when we'll talk. Like when you're doing it, that's when I'll listen to your opinion, because because anybody who's actually in it is not judging the other people who are in it, because they're like, yeah, I know it's hard, like hard stuff we're going through. Um, so so I think that a lot of, coming to figuring out who you are and like what you represent and what is just, it's like a lifelong, first of all, it's a lifelong journey. I don't think that like anybody's ever like finished, you're just always kind of figuring it out. And once you reach something, then you're never going to like just rest there. You're like, okay, what's the next thing? Like, how do I get to the next thing? And when I started doing, like I said, before I was doing a lot of recording, I was doing a lot of event performing and doing like receptions, like background music, a lot of that kind of stuff. And when I was doing that, there was always there's always people who would be like, "No, you're not right for us because of the way you dress. Like you're like I'm an Orthodox Jew and I dress modestly. I also have a human body. I don't look like a hanger. So like I've had things that like people didn't hire me because they didn't have the right look. And I think that that's always, and then that was like kind of the first challenge. I was like, okay, I guess I need to learn. I guess I need to work for myself. Like if nobody's going to hire me, then I have to figure this out myself. If nobody's going to give me opportunities, I have to figure out how to make my own opportunities. Like I have to prove to other people that I'm as good as I think that I am, or that I know that I am, or as well trained as I think that I am. So even if the opportunities aren't coming, sometimes we have to create them for ourselves. Sometimes we have to reach out to people on our own, and we have to be like, okay, listen, I want to work with you, and I'm happy to do that for free the first time. I want to get my name out. I want to start building. And I kind of have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And I was really, yeah. And I just want to tell you one story about like how messy and embarrassing and whatever. It's that last year, like literally exactly a year ago, somebody got in touch with me because they saw one of my original pieces and they wanted to use it in a play. Um, and they wanted me to be in the play and they, give me this feature and play my own original song. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then I was used to working in a certain way. I was waiting for them to send me like the sheet music for the whole show and whatever. And they never did. They like had expected me to like listen to all the recordings and then figure it out for myself and then show up ready for like the rehearsal. And that, I mean, that, there are people who work that way, but it's considered like a lower lower level of professionalism in terms of productions. And I showed up to this rehearsal, and not only did I not remember my own original piece, but I also like all the other things that were in the whole show I didn't know. And then at the end of it, they said, well, we're gonna need another, rehearsal or two before like we have our, we start running with this play. And I was just like so ashamed that I had not come ready and that I was not ready. And it was just like very embarrassing. And and then I also was like, well, I don't actually think that the way that you're running this is is high enough of a level of production. And I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And that gave me a lot of clarity that I was like, I really need to do my own thing. Oh shoot, better start working on my own thing. And I'm like a year later and I'm about to launch this thing that I've been working on since last year. And that was that part of that, like that pain and that shame and that like dealing with that situation that happened a year ago. I'm like, that was part of what gave me the momentum and the like the realization that this is what I need to do. And I need to be working on my own project. And I feel like the universe has continued to kind of push me in that way. But like I was not open to like listening.
Yeah, that's such a good story. Thank you for sharing that. Because that's the reality, I think, for so many of us is it really takes the doing, like getting into the weeds with something to fully know if it's going to resonate, if it's going to feel authentic and feel like the right space for us. So, and I think that it's so important for people to hear from successful women like you who are continuing to have those experiences, right? Because you get to like a new juncture and a new opportunity arises and you're like, oh, okay, is this for me? Is this not for me? Sometimes
Right.
it's a clear yes. And sometimes it's like, maybe that's cool. Also like
Right.
totally flattering. Somebody wants to use your music, right?
Right.
Um, and then it becomes like the next layer or the next level, which is, oh, now actually I have a better sense of how I want my music to be used out into the world and to be
Right.
shared. So that's awesome. Another thing that came up for me when you were talking was sort of this dichotomy of the challenges being like on the mindset area and also the mechanics area. When we're talking about like the tech and the tools and all the things and figuring all of that out, it's like there's all these mechanics, but then there's also the mindset. And they're both areas where we have like endless potential for growth, which I find so exciting, right? Like, how
Yeah.
boring would life and business be if we had arrived already? I'd be like,
Right.
it's
I think that that's
totally
such an
downhill.
important, yeah. It's such an important, oh my gosh. I like 2 weeks ago, right before I launched my crowdfunding campaign, I'm in the middle of crowdfunding for this show. And right before I launched it, I was just filled with all those voices, all the like villain voices, like that are just like, who do you think you are? You're not qualified, you can't do it. And I was like, I mean, those come up all the time for all of us. You're always like, you have an idea, right? And then right away you start attacking your own ideas, right? But once you are able to like move, you're like, okay, I respect that thought. I respect that thought. And I'm just going to respect you and kindly ask you to leave the room. Once you're like, now that I've heard you, I understand that like you're all trying to protect me. All these pieces of me are just trying to protect me. Once I'm going to take a little space from you. And now I'm going to try to like step into like what I actually want to do. And I think that as humans, and I see this a lot, is as humans, our way of raising our consciousness is going from being reactive to being creative. Like the mission of us as humans is to get past these fear and shame and blame and all those like negative emotions to be like, none of them matter enough that it's going to stop me from being creative. And creative ends up leading to like excitement and growth and, just so many positive things that like there's absolutely no reason, no reason that like you should let the other feelings stop you from doing those things. It should always be that like, no, if it's a reactive feeling, then that's gonna something that's not gonna help me to get to where I need to go. I think that's really
Yes.
important to like the focus and the mindset and getting into that like mindset. The mindset is it's everything. The mindset is everything.
It is because it can ignite us or it can completely derail us
Yeah.
and squash our dreams. And you shared with me, excuse me, a quote that I love too. If you can dream it, you can achieve it. And I think like it really starts with that vision. And I believe that each of us has a dream for ourselves, right? Or a
Hmm.
vision or something that we are looking to create in the world or do differently or change or whatever it might be. And the work is really found in managing, right, all the range of emotions that will come along the way and just
Right.
recognizing that they're just all human. Like they just make us human. They're not good or
Right.
bad, but they can stifle us.
Right.
Um so how do you keep your dreams alive? Like how do you have a practice or anything that you do regularly to keep your visions at the forefront and stay rooted in what you're trying to achieve?
So one of the things that people have asked me this question a lot recently because they're like, how did you do this? This project that I'm doing is massive. Like, and I did everything myself. Everything. I did hire like I had an arranger that I hired, but like I did all the like this is what we're gonna do. And like it was very like hand in hand. We did it together. And all the marketing and all the like whatever. I'm just saying it was my project and I was able to bring it to reality over the course of the past year. And people ask, and that's the question. And this is where I didn't know about you a year ago, but I hired a coach. I hired a coach a year ago because I was like, this is my vision. This is what I want to achieve. This is what I believe that I'm able to achieve with the things that I've already done and that I've already like proven that I'm talented and I've already proven that I love people and performing and that I'm very good at all the things that I'm very good at. And I need to figure out how to put them together into a product that people will. I mean, essentially, that's what I'm doing. I'm using my creativity and I'm creating a product that people will want to buy or buy tickets to or buy the merch for or buy, that they'll want to be involved in like my project. So I hired somebody. I hired a manager basically that would, that kind of manage me. Like Ariella needs to be managed because
Well,
one
a
of the
lot of
things that,
creatives, I mean, this is just
right.
to interject for a second, like a
Yeah.
lot of creatives need support on the
Yeah.
management side, the
Right.
organizational side.
Yeah.
So another common thing that we see a lot in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I was gonna say it's like I brought somebody in that not only would make me stick to my vision, but would also like be accountable and also deal with like kind of those technical things that I never would have dealt with myself. Like he went to Warner and like all these different like places because all the music that we're using is from movies, right? So it's all like licensed with these like big like publishing houses. And he went to all of those publishing houses and got all the legal stuff taken care of so that we can put on this show. And I'm like, I never ever would have done that. That would have been where I stopped. That would have been where I stopped. So I think that don't be scared. Don't be scared to get help. And also, another thing that I think is like really important is that I have to pay him a salary. And it was more money than I thought that I would be able to handle. And I was like, oh, this is a stretch. I, I don't know if I could do this. And and right away it turned into like a huge blessing and thank God, like we've had a year that okay, October like since October 7th happened here in Israel, and like that really kind of destroyed the events industry, obviously, because we're at war. And so I didn't work for a while, but then, and then things started again. And now we're working on this big project. And once this project launches, he's going to be like the manager, like setting it up with booking. And it's that I had a big vision and that I kind of jumped into it, even though I was terrified from every angle. And one more like thing that I think that is really important, because this was a big one for me, and I think that a lot of people who are listening, they might be like, oh, well, she has money or she comes from money or something like that. And I want to say that I grew up very, very poor. I grew up in a house that like sometimes we didn't have food. I grew up, my mother, like we went to Jewish schools and then they couldn't afford it. So they homeschooled. And that was like, and I grew up in Baltimore, which is like a very, it's an area that's full of crime. And then I moved to Israel all on my own when I was 17. I was totally alone, like monetarily. My husband comes from a very similar background. So like, I think that it's like important to say that and for people to hear that, because like, no, actually nothing needs to be a factor. It's all mindset. It's all, do I give value? Am I giving value with my thing that I'm doing? And understanding how much you need and how much how much you have to do in order to figure this out. And in general, for me, like spending money is terrifying because I've had so many times that I didn't have. So I've always been incredibly frugal. So like this project that I'm doing, I'm spending a lot of money on. And that's also, it's like, okay, but when you give more value to people, then they also give you more money. So I think that that's like it you have to be willing to like jump into the water in every aspect in that. And I think that anybody who's listening, you should know that Rachel is a coach. And if you want to develop your business, Rachel's a really good person to talk to. And yeah, I just,
Okay.
shout
I
out to
was going to
coaches
say, like,
everywhere.
totally. I was going to say, I love that so much. And then you like gave me a promo in my own podcast. So thank you for that. Um, but I do love that you brought that to the forefront, because I think it's really easy to just come up with excuses
Yeah,
over and
yeah,
over. And I and
yeah.
and that line that you said, like, literally there is nothing stopping you except your mindset. And so engaging in, in enlisting the help that you need to be able to continue to make moves on your dreams is critical. I started working with a new client last month, and she told me that her goal was to get to, I think it was 12 or 15 clinical hours working in her field. And when we started working together, I think she had 4 clinical hours of clients or patients. And she told me after our 3rd session that she's already up to 12 clinical hours. And so I asked her what that was about and where that came from.
Amazing.
It is amazing. And I think it's clearly like it's a testament to the work that we're doing, but it's also what you're alluding to, which is this energetic exchange of
Hmm.
like investing in yourself, putting out into the universe, right? Whatever that universe is that you connect
Right.
to, or or other worldly spirit that you connect to, but putting the message out that you are willing to invest in yourself and that you're willing to do the work. You're willing to take the
Mm,
chance on yourself, right? How often are we like, we'll go and support our friends and our family and whatever, but
mhm,
like, how often do we actually invest in ourselves? So I just
mhm.
have been totally celebrating her for
Amazing.
making that decision, right? Because it starts with that initial decision of like, I am worth it and I have something to offer, and believing that that's going to bring something of meaning, joy, fulfillment, what, healing, whatever it might be, to somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about, you shared with me that you come from an Orthodox family or an Orthodox community now
Yeah.
as well, and how you always sang in your childhood and then really leaned more into violin because there's a concept around women not necessarily sharing their voices publicly.
Right.
So how have you made the transition, and can you just speak a little bit to that, of how as an
Sure.
Orthodox Jewish woman you have really been able to find your voice and find your place in this industry?
So, like I said, I told you before that I grew up in an Orthodox society, and in my society, I have a very clear memory of my mother, who has a really, really wonderful voice, of her singing in synagogue, and people telling her not to, or people telling her she was too loud, or people telling her that she should be quiet, that it's distracting, and my whole life, I've kind of struggled with this. I was on The Voice, 5, 6 years ago, but there was not a but part of when I was on it, it was very important to me to kind of really try to understand the halakha, the Jewish like perspective on what does this whole concept mean. We have a lot of traditions of women singing publicly in the Bible. So it's like anything that has to do with women not singing is cultural, and it comes later, and it's often connects back to cultures where women were not seen at all, where what women were never even talked to. Like the sources in the Gemara, in the whatever, I'm gonna get like really technical because I love research, and this is
Yeah,
this is like my thing.
just
So
translate for our
right.
listeners who don't
So
know.
so we have like the Bible, right? And then we have a lot of books of commentary. That's basically, since the Bible was written, the Jews have been commentating on it. So, and then there was like one when after the second temple was destroyed, and the Jews ended up being actually the first temple, or in between the first two temples. After the first Jewish temple was destroyed in Jerusalem, and there was an exile, and all the people went to Babylonia, they sat down, they basically compiled all of these thoughts, all of these things. We were talking, right. So there's a lot of things that are inside of there that have to do with what is the role of women in society? What is the role of women in our society? What is appropriate for women in our society? So there's one thing where, one rabbi is talking to another rabbi, and he says to him, "Would you speak to my wife?" And he's like, "I don't see any reason that I should speak to your wife." And he's like, "You wouldn't say hello to her?" And he's like, "I don't see any reason that I should speak to your wife. Like, that's the culture. I don't see any reason. I wouldn't say hello in a letter. I wouldn't say hello, like, through somebody. I wouldn't speak to her at all. There's no reason for me to hear your wife's voice. It will only like mess up, my focus on my own wife, that kind of thing." And so there's a couple of different sources. I'm not going to get into all of them, actually, before I start like going crazy on a tangent. I'm not going to get into all of them, but just understand that like a lot of the stuff that's in the Talmud has to do with like what is cultural and what is culturally appropriate. Now, bringing that back to today, when men and women are interacting all the time, men and women are interacting all the time, and it's not really a woman's problem if a man has a problem, and that is something that when we grew up, I'm in the society that I grew up in, is that it is essentially in any culture, right? That you have a lot of like religious cultures like around. There's this purity culture and this blame culture and this rape culture that's like, oh, it's the girl's fault if the man does something. And we as a society have moved out of that. And we are moving out of that. We are saying now that it is never the woman's fault if she gets attacked, right? That is a very different than like the attitude that it used to be in the past. So I'm saying that in the context of like bringing it back to like why, and now the next stage of all of that is that I truly believe deep, deep, deep in my heart and in my soul that women's voices, the voice of women, our natural feminine energy, our wisdom, the things that we bring to the world, that is what needs to be amplified. And women, we have a natural energy of what feminine, masculine energy doesn't have to actually do with women as much as it has to do with the feminine energy. Is about receiving, about loving, about, about being, right? And about creating. And I think that the world needs so much healing in that area. I think that, we're having so many arguments and wars and so many difficult things between everybody in cultures. And I'm like, we need to fix that feminine wound that we have as a world. And we need to fix that all together. And that's going to come from the women. So we have this concept in Judaism that Geulah, or redemption, is going to come through the women. And I believe very, very deep inside of my soul, that needs to come from women not being scared to share that wisdom with each other.
Wow. That was so powerful. Thank you for sharing the depth of the history there. And I know we don't have time to go into all the details, but of course you can reach out to Ariella if you want to engage further in that conversation. But yes, thank you just for sharing that. And this is like the premise of Crescendo, right? Is giving women a chance to share their voice, and whoever else wants to listen may do so or choose not to.
Right.
Okay, I would love for you to tell us about the Thousand Faces show that you are in the process of gearing up for. It is so exciting. As Ariella mentioned, I'm going to be a sponsor, and I am just so happy to be supporting this initiative. Tell us more about it, and also how, if tickets are still available, and how people can get them.
Yeah. So we have sold about half of the tickets. And now we have, I think, about 100 left. So yeah, you better get them fast, because by the time this launches, I don't even know if there will be tickets available. I'm kind of hoping that there won't be. I'm like hoping that it will all sell out. Also this week, there's going to be in a lot of like newspapers, and, there's a lot of media attention that's coming. So that's very, very exciting. Okay. So 1,000 Faces of a Hero. Basically, I talked a little bit about my journey and like what happened a year ago with that whole event. And I was like, I need to put on my own event. And then I thought, how can I combine what is Ariella all about? What am I all about that I can bring something that nobody else could bring? So number one is the talent, right? I love getting in front of an audience. I love performing. So there's like, I'm talented at the violin. I'm talented at singing. I'm talented at speaking. I love all those things. That's number one. So, right, that's obviously it's going to come with that. And then the next thing that I love is I'm like, what do I spend all my time doing if I can? And I love reading. I've loved reading since I was a kid. I love getting involved and wrapped up in a story. I love movies. I'm very addicted to Netflix. I'm like, what do I love? I love storytelling. I love storytelling. And the third one is personal development, self-development. It's how do we change our habits, and how do we change who we are, and how do we, like, I want to go for something. So that means I need to change my habits in order to do that, in order to achieve that. How do I get over my fears? How do I deal with, the monkey in my mind that like we were talking about before? How do I deal with all that stuff? How do I deal with that? And the fourth one, which I'm not shy about saying, is that I am a recovering addict. I used to do a lot of coke, when I was like, and at a certain point I was like, I'm stopping, and I started going to the program, and like over the years, so like different addictions have come up, and I've had to treat them in different ways. So like I also come from that like direction, and those two things are connected. But I think that when I say the words that I'm a recovering addict, I am somebody who struggles with an addictive personality, and I want to I'm healing, and I'm working on getting better, and I'm working on trying to like achieve things. And the things that I've learned from dealing with my addiction are the same kinds of things that other people are dealing with when they're trying to change habits in any way. So that's the premise. That's where it started from. And I came up with this concept of 1,000 faces of a hero, which is, I feel like I'm just talking a ton.
No,
There's so much to say.
it's so good. I want to hear it. Yeah. Tell us about the
Okay.
Thousand Faces of a Hero
So,
and where that
so
name came
the,
from.
okay. So the name comes from a book that was published in the 1980s by a man named Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was a psychological student of Jung. And basically what he did was he went to thousands of cultures around the world to find their stories. And he collected all of these stories from all over the place. And he started comparing them. He started saying, what does this hero do? And what does this hero do? In every culture, we have our hero stories, right? In Judaism, we have our Moshe Rabbeinu, and we have Joshua, and we have, I mean, there's just like people, and like, what do they all go through? What are all these people? What do they go through? How did they achieve that heroic story? So, and basically he came up with what's called a prototype, which is basically, okay, this is, they all have this in common. These are the stages. So basically I built the whole show around that concept of like the hero's journey. And this is what we have to go through in order to like go on a journey and in order to be a hero. And I relate it back to like self-development and how we deal with our own issues. So that's like the concept of the show. And it's really like all about, and my goal and my mission with it is like, it's time, and I think it's so aligned with yours, right? It's time for all of us to figure out what we really want to do and just do it. Like every time I have a conversation with somebody and they're like, oh, you're so clear. It's so clear. I'm like, it's never clear. It's never clear. You have to do a lot of work and a lot of figuring out and a lot. No. And that's another problem that I see. Like lots of people are like, oh, it just falls into your lap. Like, oh, it's just magic. There is no magic. There is only hard work. And this is what you have to go through. And this is what you have to deal with. And you will deal with challenges. And don't let the challenges knock you down. Don't let the challenge is just a challenge. Right? It's not like, oh, I met some like resistance. Oh, that's it. I'm done. You know?
Yeah,
Like,
I think the other thing that really stumps people is that they think that it's supposed to be super clear before they dive in.
right. You're right.
Right. And like, it's not. It's
It's
going to
not.
be a vision.
It's
It's
not.
going to be like
Yeah.
where you want to go. But then the first step is not necessarily going to feel clear.
No.
Or
No,
like the
it's not
eighth
gonna.
step. Yeah. And that's
And
like
you're gonna
brings us
mess
full
up.
circle.
And you're gonna.
Yeah.
100%. You're gonna mess up. And you know what? And you have to be okay with that. You have to like learn to like deal with failure. One of the things that for this show, I've had to learn 1,000 things that I never ever did before. And like I kept being like, oh, I can't do this. I'll just hire someone. Oh, I can't do this. And I can't hire someone because I cannot let anybody do the thing because it's my vision. I cannot outsource these things. The only thing that I outsourced was, like I said, the legal for the show in order to put on the show. That was like the first one, and the second one is that my manager is dealing with all the things that have to do with the team on the day. Like I'm not dealing with the musicians, and I'm not dealing with the actual like hiring of like I'm in
Yeah.
the,
It's like
whatever.
a wedding planner.
Right,
Like
exactly.
no bride wants to be in charge of like all the
Right.
minutia on her wedding day. Okay, so tell us, people who attend the Thousand Faces of a Hero show, what can they expect to experience there?
Okay, so all the music is music from movies, right? So that's number one. Is that like you like cinematic music, you like songs from music, movies. That's what that's the content of the show. And then each time I stop and I relate the stage of the journey back to like how we deal with things ourselves. So what's the point? The point is that it's empowering. The point is that we live in a time that people need that. They need to hear those messages. They need to hear that they're here for a reason, that your dreams are legitimate. We need to hear that, like, not only are your dreams legitimate, but they're literally the reason that you were created. That you exist in this world and you were given seeds of things. I have a nephew who is 13 and he's finishing college and he's obsessed with like physics. I am not, but I am very glad that he is because we need all of us and all the things. And that the desire is important. Desire is important. And it's such a basic part of who you are as a human and such an important calling. It's a calling from the universe or from God or whatever. It's a calling. That is a calling. And you have to learn to listen to that. You have to listen to that. And you have to look at like what you have done and what you are good at and all those things that there you have all the tools and all the hints that your life has been hinting at you. It's been sending you. You think that like for a long time I didn't tell people that I dealt with addiction. I was like, oh, I'm embarrassed about it. And now I'm like, no, you know what? You know what? Knowing that I have dealt with that helps other people they're like, oh, I'm in the program. I have to go day by day, minute by minute. Like I can't do something big. No, you know what? You could do something big. I have I had, people comment on my Instagram that I'm fat. I'm not. I'm not. I look like a woman, but like I have a belly because I have babies. I'm like, whatever. And I'm like, you know what? The fact that I'm not tiny is another reason that I need to do this show because people need to see somebody who doesn't look like Taylor Swift. People need to be like, oh, that's proof that I could do it too. Oh, okay. So she's got whatever arms or like whatever the thing is, and it's like that's part of why I think social media has exploded in such a huge way because like you see people real people doing things and then we relate back to them. We're like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not alone, I'm not by myself, this is like we're all in this together, and we are all in this together. There is no one person who is better than any other person, and there's no one person who is more, I know you want to say loved by God or whatever. That's like a thought that I have. I'm like, oh, God doesn't want me because nobody's calling me. Like, that's not what it's about. Just like, it's all good. Like all the stuff that happens to you is happening to you for a reason. I think that the more that we think that and the more you acknowledge that and the more you acknowledge your dreams and your desires, the more fulfillment you'll get from your life and the more like you'll be done when you're done, like, and it keeps you alive. Basically.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. I mean, to all of that, it sounds like people who attend this show will feel seen and they will be on their own personal development journey, which I think is so valuable, right? This is more of an experience than it is sitting and watching Ariella play some music, which is also going to be phenomenal. I am so grateful that you came on the show today. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your voice, your story, the depths of it all. And I cannot wait for what's to come with the Thousand Faces of a Hero experience, as well as everything else that you have coming up for all of us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for having me, Rachel. This was so fun. I love it.
If you want to hear Ariella, I encourage you to hop over to Spodcast where you can find her music. She has so much there. And I think you're just going to be as amazed as I was when I started binging her content. And of course, if this episode struck a chord or generated an insight for you that you'd like to share or capture, I would be so grateful if you'd take a moment to comment, like, or share this episode. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and leave a rating if you feel so inclined so that other listeners can more easily find the show. With that, keep sharing your voice, friends.